Hello, good morning, class. If you can hear me, just type in the Q&A कि आपको सुनाई दे रहा है and आपको PPT भी दिख रही है. PPT में यहाँ पे आपको दिख रहा होगा कि we are going to start with Mahabharata, okay? And this is your one of the papers in BA English Honors first semester, and the paper name is Indian Classical Literature. Okay, so it's your core paper, so everybody has to do this. And so we don't, of course, we don't have the the whole Mahabharata, but what we do have here is so there are three sections that we are going to do from Mahabharata, which is the dicing, the sequel to the dicing, and then the third one is the temptation of Karna from the Udyog Parva. So now, first of all, we are going to talk about what is an epic. Okay, so an epic is basically a long narrative poem. Okay, and it has a very high elevated style. So it's not a very simple, let's say, informal way of talking. It has a very fancy way of talking, and it usually talks about a hero who's doing something like something great, and this hero could be somebody who is historical, it could also be somebody who's mythical, and so on. Now, in literary usage, so when we say literary usage, it means in literature. Okay, the term encompasses as an epic can be both something which is written or something which is oral. Okay, and an epic may deal with various subjects. So so the main point of an epic, as I already said, is that it talks about there's usually a hero and he's doing something great, but an epic also has a lot of other factors. So it would have histories, it would have mythology, it would have something to do with like religious tales, it would have animal stories, it would also have, let's say, moral stories and philosophical ideas. So for example, Mahabharata has the Bhagavad Gita, which is also, you can say, something about morality, but it's also about it's also a part of the Hindu religion. Okay, and usually epics are often of national or universal significance. In the case of Mahabharata, of course, it is of national significance. Everybody knows what the Mahabharata is, right? Now, what is an epic? Continuing the topic. So, an epic is basically a series of events. Okay, but there is one major thing that is happening, and that determines the fate of a lot of people at large. Okay, so there's one big event that happens, and that sort of affects everybody, a lot of people rather. And there are also a series of events, like besides that one event there are a bunch of other things that are happening which, let's say, leads to that event, or which complements that event, or which are completely independent of that event. So okay, now the setting of an epic is usually grand, like it is on a very grand scale. So it would not be the story of, let's say, a middle class household. So it's usually grand. So it will involve kingdoms and kings and nations and territories and so on. And it also includes superhuman actions. Okay, so superhuman actions would be that not everything that is happening in the epic is because people are doing it. There are things where there might be gods, or there are humans who are who can talk to gods, and so on and so forth. Okay, now it depicts larger than life scenes, and there are very vivid descriptions. So whatever is happening, it is described in a very, very vivid ways, and there are people would give long speeches, and there would be a lot of descriptions. So let's say in the Mahabharata, when the Pandavas go to the forest, that scene, how the forest is, how the Pandavas are feeling. So all of that is explained in a very elaborate fashion. Okay, and of course, an epic would include a lot of adventures and misadventures. By misadventures, I mean that something happens and there's a bunch of events happen, and they might lead to something bad. Okay, so there are good things, there are bad things, there are a lot of things which go on in an epic. An epic encompasses a large time frame. Okay, so what this means is that it will not be a story of, let's say, something that happens in 2 months, or in 1 day, or in 3 days. So an epic usually goes on, or the time period that is covered in an epic, that usually goes on for, let's say, several generations. It can go on for centuries. Okay, And so in this sense, it covers a wide range of time, and it covers a wide range of space also, because as I said, that we are not looking at, let's say, a small family. We're looking at huge kingdoms as part of the epic. Okay. So this is a generic, introduction to epics, and this is something that holds true for most types of epics. All right. Now, now we're going to talk about what are the features of an epic. Okay. So the first of all, the narrator. Now every epic has a narrator. Okay, somebody has to tell you the story, what is going on, right? And it usually begins with an invocation or a prayer to the gods. Basically, what happens is that the narrator prays in the very beginning of the epic, prays to the gods, and says that please help me to tell this big, huge tale. Okay, and then the narrator will introduce something called an epic question. Now, epic question is basically the main topic around which the entire story of the epic sort of revolves. Okay, and the theme and question, and this theme, like this epic question, is related to something like a general truth. Okay, so for example, it is about, let's say, it can be a debate about war and justice, since and they are both very important themes of the topic. So most of the epics usually have war and the idea of justice as in the victory of good over evil, which is also the case in Mahabharata. Okay, now it is also episodic in nature. Now, this is very important. So, an epic has several episodes, or in the case of Mahabharata, they are called parvas. Okay, and each of them are connected to each other. Okay, but at the same time, they're connected to each other, but at the same time, they are a story on its own. Okay, while these stories can affect or define what the other story, or are connected to the other story, they are complete in themselves. So if you just read, let's say, one episode, that episode in itself makes sense. Okay, it's not something that you don't understand. Okay, so this is one of the very important qualities of story, features of an epic, that there could be multiple episodes, and they all are complete independently, but they're also interconnected, which sort of gives the shape of the whole story. Now, next thing, an epic is grand eloquent. What this means is that an epic is written in a very formal language, which I already said, and it is grand in scope again, which means that it covers a lot of ground. It covers time and space. Okay, an epic would reject ordinary speech. It means that the way you talk to your friends or the way you talk to your parents, that's not the way people talk in an epic. They talk in a very in a very stylized language. So it's not a kind of a language which people use in everyday life. Okay, and this type of language includes things like epic conventions and epic similes. Now, first, I hope that you know what a simile means. A simile means that you compare one thing with another thing to make the description more interesting. So we say something like, as brave as a lion, right? Now, an epic simile, also called a Homeric simile. Now, Homeric word comes from the word Homer. He was also somebody who wrote epics, and you also have him in your other paper, in the European classical paper. And an epic simile is something which is very, very long, which is very descriptive. So a normal simile, like as brave as a lion, is very short. Okay, now an epic simile would be something which is very long. So it would say something like, I've given you an example here, and so as it says, as when the shudder of the west wind suddenly rises, scatters across the water, and the water darkens beneath it, so darkening were settled the rank of Achaeans and Trojans in the place. So what is basically he's saying is that it was a very dark night. That's what he's saying, but then he goes into this very elaborate description of when there's a storm and when there's a wind, and how the water sort of looks very dark in the wind, and so on and so forth. So it's a very elaborate ways of a simile, and this is very common in epics, and that's why they're called epic similes. Now, what are epic conventions? Epic conventions are basically, characteristics of epic poems that you find in almost all of the epics. So epic conventions is also a type of writing, and this would include things like, very big settings, very fancy language. There would be battles, there would be divine intervention, as in there would be gods who are also part of the story. Okay, so moving on, human divine characters. Now, as there are characters who would not. I already said that there's divine intervention, so sometimes god would appear in the story as gods. Sometimes they would appear as avatars, like they would take a human form, and sometimes gods come and they interact with other human beings, and so on and so forth. Now, temperament and moral attitude. Each character in an epic displays a particular temperament and moral attitude. Okay, so somebody is good and somebody is bad. All right, and so when this good character and when this bad character, when they have a clash, it also represents a larger framework of a clash between of good versus bad. Okay, so in this way, the conflict between characters in the epic actually becomes a conflict between two value systems. All right, now, optimism. All right. Now, optimism basically means that an epic usually ends with a promise that we are moving towards a better and a just world. Okay, as a by just world I mean a world of justice. And usually in the end of an epic, the good is rewarded and the evil is punished. And in many ways, Mahabharata can be looked as a fight between good and evil, and also a fight between dharma and adharma. Now, moving on, features of an epic. Continuing on the features of an epic. Now, an epic is basically what we call heroic. An epic has a hero, and or heroes. Sometimes there are multiple heroes, and they have extraordinary power. Sometimes they can be, and or they have divine power, meaning that God has given them some divine quality. Okay, and the hero is either a progeny of god or a disciple, like, so he could be a bhakt, basically. That's what disciple means. And a progeny means that, let's say, he's a demigod, means that he's born from the union of a god and a human, so he's half god half human. The hero of the epic is able to interact with gods, and in crucial moments he can also see the gods. So for example, in the during the battle of Kurukshetra, you have Arjun, and he talks, well, they Krishna is always in as a part of Mahabharata, but especially during the battle, Arjun speaks to Lord Krishna, and then and that's when then he narrates the Bhagavad Gita. Okay, so these heroic characters are able to draw strength. So basically, so when Arjun hears the story of, or when Krishna tells him about the moral dictates in Bhagavad Gita, so they draw strength from the wisdom of gods and knowledge from the wisdom of gods. And the main important thing is that all the heroes in epic, that they're agents of action, or they're agents of change, meaning that they're not victims. It's not that something happens and then they get affected and they do nothing. So what it means, that heroes are somebody who take action, that so they do something and that further has consequences. Okay, now the Mahabharata is meant to be a record of human beings who fall prey to temptations. Okay, just keep that in mind. And in the Mahabharata, however, there is not one person who is heroic, as is the case with Ramayana. There's not one hero in Mahabharata. That of course, I'm sure that most of you already know. Now, what are the differences between Mahabharata and Ramayana? And this is going to be something that you should keep in mind to realize that how Ramayana is more of a typical epic, and Mahabharata is slightly different. Like, it's not a very conventional epic. Now, unlike the Mahabharata, the focus is entirely on the character of Ram. So there's one hero, Ram. Ram is the hero, and the focus is pretty much on him. While in Mahabharata, there are multiple events, there are multiple characters, and the focus is sort of spread on all of these characters. Okay, and Mahabharata is really not a one-man show, and this is important because usually in life, like, there is not one person who defines everything. So there are multiple people and multiple things are happening. So Mahabharata is actually relatively more closer to reality because there is not one particular person who sort of affects the story. Now, while Ramayana is an epic in praise of an ideal man, right? Ram is an ideal man, and we praise Lord Rama. That's why the whole story of Ramayana. Mahabharata, on the other hand, focuses on human weaknesses. So while Ramayana tells you what an ideal man should be, Mahabharata shows you what happens when humans give in to their weaknesses. Okay. Now, while in the Ramayana, God is the center of the narrative, right? Because Ram is a god. In Mahabharata, the humans are the center of the narrative. Yes, they interact with gods, but they are the center of the narrative. So in this way, Mahabharata is not a very typical heroic epic. Now, some key facts about Mahabharata. It has over 100,000, so 1 lakh verses, and it is the longest epic poem ever written. So there are epics from all different kinds of cultures. There are Greek epics, there are Roman epics, and so on and so forth. And they have all, there are about, and it has been, and it is one of the, it's the longest epic in the world. Okay, and it was written around 4th century before Christ, or maybe even earlier. We don't exactly know when it is. There are different, like, so the different scholars give very different dates. So we are going with 4th century. It is also the longest version. So Mahabharata has a lot of different versions, right? Because many people have translated it, have edited it, but the longest version of Mahabharata has over 100,000 shlokas. Okay, so sorry, when I said so 100,000 shlokas, and this means that there are over 200,000 individual verse lines, because a sloka is a couplet, and in total there are 1.8 million words. Okay, so the Mahabharata is roughly 10 times as Iliad and Odyssey combined, and these are two very popular Greek epics which you will study in your other paper. Okay, and it is also 4 times longer than the Ramayana. Now, Mahabharata has a principal narrative that binds the entire work. So, remember in the very beginning, I told you that there's always going to be one main theme, the epic question. So, it has a principal narrative which sort of puts together all the episodes. And the episodes, or in the case of Mahabharata, we call them parva, or you can also call them books. There are 18 of them, and on top of that, there is another parva called the Harivashma Parva, which is basically the genealogy of the story of Krishna, which is not covered in the other 18 books. Okay. Now, usually, or whatever, like, it's sort of understood that Mahabharata is written by Vyas. Okay, Ved Vyasa, and his full name is Krishna Dhyapana Vyasa, and it says that he composed the Mahabharata, and he was also a participant, like he was also there, like he was a part of the events that are talked about in the Mahabharata. So therefore he's an eyewitness, and therefore that validates the fact that he can compose the Mahabharata, he can tell the story of Mahabharata. Then what happens? Vyas goes and he tells the story of Mahabharata to his disciples, to his students. Okay, and now different students of him go and tell the story to different people. So Narada, who's a student of him, goes and tells to the gods. Okay, and so there are different people, and for you, the main important thing is Vaishampana. Vaishampana is one of his disciples, and he goes and tells the story to the mortals. Mortals means people like us, humans. So the first time he tells the story is to the king Janamaya, and Janamaya is basically the grandson of Abhimanyu, okay, and who wants to know what happened to his ancestors, okay. And the tale as recited. So when Vaishampana is reciting the tale to Janamaya, it is also heard by another person whose name is Ugrashava, and he is a son of a bard. A bard is basically a person who's a storyteller. So when Vaishampana is telling the story to let's say to King Jamaya, there's another person who hears the story called Agrashava, and then what happens? And Agrashava goes and further tells the story to a bunch of other sages and saints. Okay, so technically Mahabharata as a whole is recited. So when it is composed, as in it is written by Vyasa, but it is recited or narrated by Ugrashava, or which actually means the loud voiced, who may be seen as the first narrator of the book. So understand this, that Vyasa wrote the Mahabharata, but the narrator of the story is understood as Ugrashava. All right. Now, changing narratives. Now here's the thing. So what Vyasa wrote and what we read today in the Mahabharata we cannot say that it is exactly the same thing. So what happens is, many episodes and legends, it's assumed that a lot of other people, a lot of other sages has added to the story. Okay, for instance, many believe that the Bhagavad Gita was not written by Vyasa, and that it was added later, and it doesn't really fit into the text. Okay, it doesn't make sense why there's suddenly Bhagavad Gita in a story about war. Okay, now in the oral tradition, each time a text was told, new elements were added to it. So what happens is, before, I told you in the very beginning that epics are effectively what do you call, they can be oral and they can be written. So in the very, very beginning, like, for Mahabharata has been there for thousands of years. So in the very beginning, uh, Mahabharata was sort of, narrated orally. So, like, I would tell you the story, you will not read it. Okay. So with every telling, the teller might just add something new to the story, or the way he's narrating might make the meanings of the story shift. Okay. So so this way, the Mahabharata has gone through several versions, all right. And a very distinct feature of oral literature is that it is defined by collective ownership of a community or a people who add to the compositions passed from one generation to other. So if I'm telling you a story, and then you go and tell your story to your child, and then your son goes and tells your story to your daughter, to his children. So this means that with every telling, even, you know the way we tell the story, it sort of changes the story, and therefore we all sort of become narrators and composers of the story. Okay. However, when later, after several thousand years, when Mahabharata had a standard form, okay, when it was put in a written form, okay, and it was not supposed to be heard. Finally, Mahabharata is didactic in tone and is meant to be a manual, okay, for moral code of conduct. Didactic, matlab, it basically preaches, it tells you what to do and what not to do. And so it's basically a story about it's a book about moral code of conduct. All right. So I am seeing a lot of comments here. I will just quickly look at the Q&A. If I'm getting anything here. Well, there's nothing in the Q&A. Right. Now, what is the issue here? Because I'm getting a lot of messages, and yeah, people, please don't send me messages, because I cannot look at your messages, and you just have to reply to, just type in the Q&A. All right. Now, contemporary interpretations. So because it has changed so many forms, Mahabharata has been interpreted by many people. Okay. So for example, and this is a very, very brief amount of examples that I'm giving you, that for example, a Telugu writer, Lakshmi Prasad, he wrote a novel called Draupadi, and the main center figure in the Mahabharata was Draupadi. Okay. And she is a character, she is, a strong woman, and she's shown to be a confident woman, and and so on and so forth. Now, as early as the 15th century, somebody called Sarla Das, who wrote a Uriya Mahabharata. So the Mahabharata, the story was the same, but she also added a lot of, like, very, very local Uriya myths and folklores in it. Okay. Similarly, there's also Assamese version of Mahabharata, and one very interesting Assamese version uh, includes, so there is a part in the Sanskrit Mahabharata which is called the Stri Parva. Stri Parva literally means the woman's book or the woman's chapter. So in the Assamese version, the Stri Parva is actually not a simple translation of the original. In the Assamese version, in fact, the women of the two warring groups, which is the Pandava woman and the Kaurava woman, they also take up, arms, and they also fight with each other, which is not there in the original Mahabharata. And Draupadi is leading the Pandavas, and then she wins the war. Okay, so this is a very extra edition in this Assamese version. All right, so now variations such as these, so all these differences and all these new additions or changes such as these make the text of the Mahabharata more productive, right? In that, there is always scope for a new narrative to emerge, and it is compelling. All right, it is in this sense a collective, and it is collective and a social epic. Means that the epic, as I already said, it is sort of owned by everybody, and everybody is able to change it or can change it. Okay. Now, main story and societal context. So what is the main story? The main story, I'm sure everybody knows. So it is basically, there are two branches of a family, the Pandavas and the Kauravas, who in the battle of Kurukshetra, they fight for the throne of Hastinapur. Now, in the society, Kshatriyas had a very definitive code of morality to guide them. Okay. So what it means is that the Kshatriya code, like, so the Hindu caste system, right? So there's Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudras. And in the case of the Kshatriya, so they have a very definitive moral code that as a Kshatriya, you can do this and you cannot do that. So as a Kshatriya, they cannot refuse protection to a refugee. They can never forget a good deed. They can never refuse a challenge. Okay. So, and these moral codes of Kshatriya is what that the Pandavas follow very strictly. And this is and it is because of this, because of following all these rules of what it means to be a Kshatriya. It is because of this that Yudhisthira is not able to refuse when Shakuni challenges him to a game, because when you are challenged as a Kshatriya, you never say no. Okay, even the Yudhisthira knows that he will lose the game with Shakuni, the dice game, he still agrees because it is his dharma as a Kshatriya to accept a challenge. Okay, now at the same time, we are always told that Yudhishthir is a great Kshatriya because he follows all the norms at the same time. However, in the story, there is a part where it says there are 88,000 Santaka householders whom Yudhishthir supports, each of them with 30 slave girls. So now here I just want you to think a little bit. What I'm saying here is that if Yudhishthir is basically somebody who's a very good Kshatriya, who's a brave warrior, then at the same time he's also in favor of owning slaves. So does that make him a good person? So how would you relate this? Is just following the rules of the dharma is what defines a good person, or also also there are some other moral codes that a person should follow, right? Now Mahabharata as a literary text. So Mahabharata, what is the Mahabharata? What is it? Is it a historical text, or is it a poetic expression of the times? Is it a book of moral laws or scriptures? These questions usually come to mind when we look at an ancient literature. So Mahabharata itself, like the book Mahabharata, it presents itself as itihasa, means history, an account of the way things indeed were. Okay, yet the Mahabharata was not only itihasa. I mean, of course, it is not. You can, like, the whole debate about whether Mahabharata was really real is not part of this discussion. But the idea is that Mahabharata is not only itihasa, like it shows itself as a story, but it is actually a poem. Okay, it's kavya. Kavya means poem. So, and what type of poem it is? It is an epic poem. So eventually, Mahabharata has also been seen as something which gives an authoritative moral discourse, which I already said that it is a book about moral code of conduct for human beings. So it projects itself as a history. It projects itself as history. At the same time, it also depicts. At the same time, it also depicts that it is a but it is actually a poem. Okay, it's a history. It presents itself as history. It is actually a poem, and at the same time, this poem reveals certain things which can be looked as what human beings are supposed to follow. What are the moral codes of conduct? Thus, for us, the primary concern, like how we as students of literature understand Mahabharata, is to view the Mahabharata as a literary text with an internal logic and structure. Okay, it has an internal logic and structure, meaning that, again, going back to the idea of Mahabharata being something like of Mahabharata being having an epic question and having a one grand event or one grand purpose. So Mahabharata has a story, and it has an internal logic and structure, and it never moves. It never goes away from its main theme, which is the struggle, which is the war between two cousins and for succession and for political power. Okay, now according to Anandavardhana, and he's a famous Sanskrit literary critic from the 9th century AD, and he is primarily, he's known for his work called Dhanvya Lok. You don't need to focus on that. For him, so Anandavardhana, who's a Sanskrit critic, he calls the Mahabharata a Dhvani Kavya. A Dhvani Kavya basically means it's a poetry of suggestion, meaning it is a poetry of telling you what to do, how to live a good life, how to be a good person. All right. Now, The role of fate and chance. So these are, now we are coming down to topics, all right? And the role of fate and chance. The Mahabharata fosters the idea of destiny as unalterable. Okay, so what Mahabharata really says is that whatever is your fate, okay, or it's like saying that jo hoga wo hoga, like you can't, like honi ko nahi dal sakte basically. Okay, so Mahabharata fosters the idea of destiny as unalterable, that destiny cannot be changed. Okay, so for foreknowledge of events cannot correct grievous wrongs or cannot prevent them from happening. Basically, it also says that even if you know what is going to happen in the future, because many characters in the Mahabharata can see the future, and even they can't stop the war. So it basically means that even if you know the future, you can't still stop it from happening. Okay, so basically so there is a kind of whatever humans do, it cannot change the fate. Like fate is something which is predetermined, it cannot be affected. However, and this is very important, human choice, what humans do, is also given a lot of importance in the Mahabharata. Yes, it is true that whatever they do will ultimately lead to what is written in their fate, yet how they respond, how they react to situations is also extremely important as part of the Mahabharata. Okay, so the innate impulse in human beings to strive and act, even when faced with odds, keeps the text of humans keeps the text of Mahabharata human centric and optimistic. Basically, yes, it is saying that everything is decided, but at the same time, how humans interact, how they react to situations, what they do, how they face challenges, and so on and so forth, that also is the main crux of Mahabharata. And therefore this keeps the story very human centric. Here humans are not seen as victims of fate. Yes, ultimately fate is stronger, but that doesn't mean that the humans are just victims and they just accept everything passively. So they try to change things. They try to change the course of the destiny, and this what really the idea is. Now, the idea a man acts that a man's acts are meaningless is reiterated in the Mahabharata time and again. Okay, so Yudhishthir is saddened by the truth divulged to him by Vyas in the text, that bitter animosity amongst the cousins is in store, one that would wipe out most of the Kshatriyas from the earth. Yudhishthir tries in vain to cement ties and build friendly relations with Duryodhana. What really is happening is that Yudhishthir already knows that in the future there's going to be a war between the Kauravas and the Pandavas, and in this war, many people will die. And he tries a lot to try and be, to try and remove the animosity, to try and befriend Duryodhana, try to be friends with the Kauravas, because he does not want this to happen. So the fact that the Yudhishthir is trying to do this shows how human beings are making choices, how they are trying to respond to situations. Okay, so this is very crucial for you to understand. Now, the meaning of dharma, the law. The concept of dharma is central to the epic of Mahabharata. Now, essentially, uh, the idea of dharma is which sort of guides the whole of Mahabharata. I already said in the beginning that epics are usually about victory over good over evil, about evil versus good, and so on and so forth. Uh, in this case, dharma and adharma are also very important parts of Mahabharata. Okay, so what is effectively happening here is that you are a person who's dharmic. Okay, and if you're a dharmic person, it means that you're a good person. That is the logic behind Mahabharata. But then you as a scholar, you as a student should ask this question: is this always true? Are dharmic persons always good persons? For example, Yudhishthira is also in the a few slides before, I told you that Yudhishthira is shown to be this dharmic person who follows the dharma very, very strictly. But at the same time, he also has no problems with having slave girls. So there is a clear contradiction, that you would think that how is a dharmic person also supporting somebody is also okay with slavery. So is it just enough to follow whatever a moral code of books say, whatever, or are there more things about being human that you must do to be a good human? Okay. Now, the text underpins the idea of yatho dharma tatho jaya, meaning that where there is dharma, there is victory. Okay. Also also dharma is important for the concept of existence in Mahabharata. It basically means that you cannot exist, you cannot live if you don't have dharma. Like, without dharma you cannot have a meaningful, a true existence. Okay. Now, we are of course not reading the Mahabharata in Sanskrit, and the translated version that we are reading is by J.A.B. Van Buchanan. Okay, and he translates the word dharma to the word law. All right, but here dharma actually means a lot of things. It doesn't only mean law. It means truth. It means justice. It means morality. It means righteousness. It means code of conduct and obligation, and most importantly, it also means duty. Okay. Now, dharma is defined by a person's position in society and the role one plays. Basically, your dharma is defined by who you are, what your role is in a society. Okay, so there is the king's law, right? The king's dharma, which basically tells you what the king should do, what he cannot do, what are his ethical duties towards his subjects. Um, he's meant to be, and he's meant to follow, and for the king he's meant to follow the principle of justice above all. Now, there is also the dharma of the son, of a daughter, of a brother, sister, mother, husband. Means that what should you do, what is your dharma as a son towards your parents, what is your dharma as a husband to your wife. Okay, what is dharma as a son to your as a son, as a parent to your children. Okay, so all of these, so dharma basically defines how human relationships should be, and how you should follow, how you should perceive and uh, participate in human relationships. And how and why dharma is important. Again, dharma is the reason why the Pandava brothers keep quiet when Yudhisthira loses them in a game of dice. So I'm sure that you all know that that Yudhisthira sort of stakes everything, that he puts himself, like वो दाव लगा देता है अपने सब कुछ दाव. And his brothers do not revolt, do not protest, because Yudhishthira is the eldest brother and they cannot speak against him. So even if Yudhishthira is doing something wrong, the brothers do not say something against him because he is an elder brother. Now, again, here you can question that, is it really a good thing to blindly follow dharma? Yes, for dharma you should not be questioning elders. But if the elders are doing wrong, should you still not question it? So that's the question here. So that's the point here. Okay. Now, uh, this is, up until now, what I have really done is that I've given you a description of how Mahabharata, like what really Mahabharata is, what an epic is, what are the specific features, of Mahabharata, and more importantly, I touched upon some of the key points of Mahabharata, which is that fate versus chance, as in human beings, everything is pre-decided, and human beings cannot alter the face of alter the future, but at the same time how human beings react, how they respond, is also very important. The second point which I raised was that there is the significance of dharma, which defines Mahabharata, and how basically this idea of Mahabharata is that you must always follow dharma, you must always follow the path of justice, duty, and law, and without dharma you cannot have a good existence. So these are the main things and the main ideas about what we have discussed till now. All right, so I am now going to move on, and I'm going to touch upon the idea of, now I'm going to move on to the first unit which we have. So I told you there are 3 units in this text, and the first unit which we have here is the dicing, and this is from the book of the assembly hall. Okay, so which in Hindi or which in Sanskrit is called the Sabha Parva. Okay, now we are going to talk about just this one scene of the dicing. All right, now what is happening here is that we are made aware in the beginning of the book of the assembly hall that the Pandavas have risen to great power, and that a celestial assembly hall has been built by Maya, a Danava, to reciprocate the good acts of Arjun, who has rescued him. So, first of all, be very sure or be aware that we are not starting the Mahabharata from where it actually starts in the original text. Okay, so what is really happening here is that we are starting from we are starting the story from a point where the Mahabharatas have the Pandavas have a lot of power. They have risen to great power, and they have this beautiful palace. And this palace is built by a Danav called Maya. Okay, Maya literally just means more Maya. Okay, and it could also mean something which is what it really means is that it looks something which is it's something very beautiful, and it is something very alluring, but at the same time it is very deceptive. So the whole idea about how we say some more Maya hai, meaning that it is something which is very attractive, but it can also be deceptive. It is not something real. Okay. Now, despite all attempts of the Kauravas to cause harm to the Pandavas, they later shine in splendor of newly acquired wealth. So the Pandavas, they try to do, sorry, before, up until this point, the Kauravas try to do a lot of things to Pandavas. They try to kill them, they try to harm them, but nothing really, they don't succeed. And by this time, when we start the book of the assembly hall, the Pandavas are extremely wealthy and they have survived and they're fine despite Kauravas trying to harm them. Now, the dicing, the scene that we have in our syllabus, the dicing from the book of the assembly hall shows us that Duryodhana has been overpowered and tricked by the marvels of Yudhishthira's palace. Okay, now basically what happens is that Duryodhana goes to see the palace that Maya, the Danav, has created for the Pandavas, and he is completely awestruck by what he sees. Okay, and then of course he's very miserable because he's very jealous that the Pandavas have this beautiful palace, right? Now, Duryodhana's mystery and the grandeur of the Pandavas, right? What misery, sorry, not mystery. And what really is happening here is that now Duryodhana goes and he sees this beautiful palace, this Yudhishthira's Maya palace, okay? And this causes him acute stress and despair that is incurable, okay? He recounts the tale, like he tells that, okay, I went and I saw this very nice palace, and he goes and he tells this tale to his uncle Shakuni, okay, who in vain tries to tell Duryodhana that okay, it doesn't matter, koi baat nahi yo. So when he's trying to pacify Duryodhana, Shakuni tells them that Pandava, you don't feel bad. It's just that Pandavas have a lot of luck and power. That's why they have this nice palace. Okay, so he says you must harbor no resentment against Yudhishthir, for the Pandavas have always enjoyed good luck. In the past, you have often made attempts on them with many wiles, and the tiger-like men escaped because of their luck. So he's basically saying, what Shakuni is saying is that, oh, don't feel bad that Pandavas are so rich and they have this nice palace. You really tried, to harm them and to affect them, but they just have very good luck. What can you do? They're just very lucky people, is what he's saying. Okay, now when note in the above passage that Shakuni, when he says that that Pandavas are just very lucky, he also does acknowledge the fact that the Pandavas are very hardworking and they work very tirelessly. And yes, they are the son of Pandu, so they did receive a palace and so on and so forth, but they also grew it. Like, it's not just that, oh, he has a palace or they have a kingdom, but they also grew the kingdom. They also made the kingdom prosperous by using their own energy, by using their own hard work. Okay. And importantly, what everything that Pandavas have, they have won it because of their own effort. So for example, as I already said, the palace of illusions, or the Maya palace, is built by the Danava precisely because Arjun had rescued or had helped the Danava. Okay, now continuing the same topic, Shakuni's assessment of the Pandava, when he says that, oh, the Pandavas are very lucky and that they work really hard, it sort of makes Duryodhana even more angry. It sort of makes his suffering even worse. Okay, and when he sees the palace of illusion, the Maya palace, now Duryodhana wants it. He's that, how does the Pandavas have it, and I should also want it. I want it. It's basically like that yearning for the palace, and he just wants to take revenge from the Pandavas for having something this nice. Okay, now the palace of illusion reminds Duryodhana of his humiliation as well. So first, the point to keep in mind is that Duryodhana is extracted. Duryodhana has no idea. He goes and he sees the palace, this palace of illusions, the Maya palace, and he is extremely tempted. He is jealous. He sees that, oh, they have this beautiful palace and I don't have it. I want the palace as well. And another thing why he's so angry and upset is because when he was at the palace, he was humiliated. He was humiliated and he was made fun of by the Pandavas. So they made fun of him, and this sort of added fuel to the fire. So, for example, what happens? So when he's in the Maya palace, and Maya basically means it's all illusions. So he's seeing things which are not actually there. So, for example, when he was in the Maya palace, he pulled up his robe, like his garment, because he thought that there is water, but actually there was no water. It was just land. Similarly, he tried to open a door, and which appeared to be open, and then he realized that, oh, no, there is no, it was a closed door, so he couldn't, and at one time he walked away thinking that a door is closed, but it wasn't. So the palace of illusions made him, tricked him. It was there were a lot of tricks which were played against him, and it was very humiliating for him, and that's another reason why he's so upset and angry. Now, Duryodhana's misery and the grandeur of the Pandavas. I'm still continuing on to this topic. What happens is that these incidences leave Duryodhana in a state of despair, and he is driven to the thoughts of suicide. First, he is absolutely jealous that he doesn't have the palace. Second, he's absolutely furious that he has been insulted in the palace. Okay, so, and because he's after all a prince, like he's the eldest son of the Kauravas, he's the eldest brother of the Kauravas. He is embarrassed and jealous, and he has the yearning for the palace, and he wants to take revenge. And so Duryodhana tells Shakuni that when I saw all the blazing fortune of the Pandavas, I felt great resentment, and I am burning, though that is not my only way. I shall enter the fire, or drink poison, or drown myself, for I shall not be able to live. He is so angry, so humiliated, so jealous that he says that I'm just going to kill myself. Okay, now Duryodhana attaches significance to the fact that the five brothers are united with several kings who act as their allies and are invincible. Another thing which Duryodhana doesn't like is basically that the Pandavas are not just, it's not just one kingdom. Like, they're also friends with other kings, and they also have very strong allies. Okay, and while he thinks that he's completely alone, and he has no allies. Now, and this is when Shakuni tells him that that's not true. He also has allies. There are also a lot of people who support him, and he also has a lot of wealth. So why is he so upset? However, Duryodhana is not convinced. He is not happy, and you will notice that Duryodhana despairs, and because, and why is he like, he also has allies and he also has wealth. However, he's still not happy, because when he compares himself with the Pandavas, his fame appears to have faded. Like, his power looks smaller compared to the dazzle of the court of Indraprastha. Okay, now for those who are a little bit not sure about what is really happening, now keep this in mind that Hastinapur is ruled by Dhritarashtra along with his sons, which are the Kauravas, and Indraprastha was ruled by Yudhisthira and his brothers. Now, these are two different cities in the place of the place of Mahabharata, and here I have written some notes. And now keep this in mind that I will share the PPT with you, and what I will do is, you have another class tomorrow, and I will share the second PPT as well, what we do tomorrow, and I'll share both of them with all of you tomorrow. I don't know how to share it really, so I will probably just forward it to some of you who have just messaged them, then you can just forward it further to other people. All right. Now, originally, Indraprastha was a part of Hastinapur. All right, and when the Kauravas and Pandavas fought for the throne, the kingdom of Hastinapur was divided into two. Okay, so Indraprastha was a part of Hastinapur, but it got divided. Then they both were fighting for the throne, and Hastinapur and Khandavarsh. And Hastinapur was given to Duryodhana, and Khandaprastha was given to Yudhishthira. And Khandaprastha was basically a forest region, and this forest region was cleared to build a city. and the city was designed by Vishwakarma, a great architect, and it got the name of Indraprastha because of its resemblance to the city of the Lord of Indra. All right, so I'm going to shut this notes thing down so that you can see the PPT better. And now, moving on, I'm going to sum up this whole Duryodhana being so miserable about the whole thing. In itself, Duryodhana's wealth or power has not diminished. Okay, so keep this in mind that Duryodhana के साथ कुछ बुरा नहीं हुआ है. Okay, like except for the fact that he was mocked in the palace, his own wealth and power has not diminished. While his rivals may have prospered, Duryodhana has not met with any misfortune. Okay, so because it's not that because the Pandavas are getting wealthier that Duryodhana is getting poorer, or that Pandavas is getting more powerful, so Duryodhana is becoming less powerful. That is really not what is happening. Okay, it is only when he sees his palace and kingdom in relative worth vis-a-vis the Pandavas that he becomes insecure and dejected. It is only when he starts comparing himself with the Pandavas that he becomes insecure. That he thinks that उनके पास मेरे से ज़्यादा इतना सामान, मेरे से better palace क्यों है, मेरे से ज़्यादा power कैसे है? So and then he becomes insecure and dejected. Thus he asserts, like in fact even he admits it, and he says that what man like me who sees his sovereignty over earth with such wealth and such a sacrifice would not burn with fever, right? Still his authority and power stands jeopardized in the face of an alternate power. So basically, up until this point, the fact that the Pandavas are strong and powerful and wealthy, right? This has not affected Duryodhana in any which way. However, he feels that his power and his authority are at threat because there is this other people who have so much power. Okay, so he says, for what man of metal in this world will have patience when he sees his rivals prosper and himself decline? Now, yes, his rivals are prospering, but he himself is not really declining. Okay, it's a comparative thing. He thinks that अगर कोई और भी powerful हो गया, then हो सकता है कि this will threaten his power. But अभी तक ऐसा कुछ हुआ नहीं है. It is all in his mind basically. Okay, and at the person level, another thing why he's so upset is because for his entire life, he hates the Pandavas. Okay, for his entire life he just hates them. Like he has a long-term enmity with the Pandavas. So when he sees that that they have emerged victorious and they have won many friends, and and they have and the fortune have favored them, it just makes him extremely angry and jealous, as I keep telling you over and over again. Right now, Shakuni's reassurance and conspiracy. Now, okay, people, what I really want you to do, I'm going to stop here for 1 minute and tell you that there is a Q&A section. So all of those who are logged in here and who can hear me and can see me, there is a Q&A section, and in this section you will be able to chat and like send me your questions, because I cannot see. I am just going to open this, and I cannot see your your private messages or whatever. So let me just open this, and I'm going to open the Q&A. So आपके side में एक Q&A दिख रहा होगा, वहाँ पे you can send me questions. I'm not seeing any questions there. Okay, so send me questions there. You are sending me private messages and you're trying to call me. That is not the way to go about. Okay, you cannot call me in the middle of a class. I'm not teaching you. I'm not teaching one person here. Okay, so type in the live event Q&A if you have questions so that I can answer it. If you send me private messages, I will not reply to them. I am not here to reply to every single person. I'm not a private tutor. Just understand that. Okay. So, and also it is extremely disturbing. I've got some 60 messages privately and people have tried to call me. Please don't do that. It's extremely distracting. Okay. So please type in your live event Q&A. All right. Now, I am going to move on here and we are going to continue. So now next thing is Shakuni's reassurance and conspiracy. All right. Now Duryodhana receives assurance from Shakuni. Okay. And he says that, but also admits that the Pandavas cannot be defeated in battle by force, not even by the hosts of God. Okay, they are great warriors and archers, known for their weapons, and are battle crazy. So, at this point, what is happening is that Duryodhana has been told that, Shakuni tells Duryodhana that, you know it's okay, we will take care of it, but you also must remember that you cannot defeat Pandavas in a battle. Okay, you cannot defeat them by force. And even if you have gods on your side, you cannot defeat them because they're that powerful. Okay, so you must find another way to to control them, to destroy them, to diminish them. Okay, and therefore he suggests that the formidable group of Pandavas can be defeated in gambling, which is the weakness of Yudhishthir. Okay, so he says that because we cannot defeat Pandavas in a battle. Okay, therefore we must defeat them. Therefore we must defeat them through a different way, and the only way of defeating them is by gambling. Okay, because Yudhishthir likes to gamble a lot, and that is his weakness. Okay, now, he's basically he's Shakuni wants to exploit the fact that Yudhishthir is a gambler. Okay, now Shakuni proclaims itself that he has been undefeatable in gambling. He says that we all know that Yudhishthir likes to gamble, and we all know that I cannot be defeated in gambling. Therefore, we are going to ensure that the Pandavas lose everything by inviting them to a game of gambling. Okay, and I'm quoting lines from the text, and keep in mind that everything that you see something that you see in italics like this. Okay, these are basically lines from the book that you have, and make sure that you buy the book and you read it. Okay, this is a big problem with most of the students here, that you do not buy the book and you do not read it. This is not school. We are not going to spoon feed you. If you are going to study literature, you have to do a lot. You have to read at least what has been asked, what is in your course. Okay, our job as teachers is not to tell you the story what is happening. We are here to to analyze what the story is. So please get the book, get the syllabus, and buy the book, read the book. Okay, and so that you understand this better. Otherwise, it's not really going to make sense. Even if you know the Mahabharata, you should still read what the parts in the parts that are in your syllabus. Get the GAB Van Buchanan book. All right. I Now, yeah, moving on. So Shakuni proclaims that he's undefeatable in gambling. He says that I don't have any match on earth or in any three worlds challenge the Cortenia to a game of dice with my skill with the dice. King, I am certain to take them from his kingdom and his radiant fortune in your behalf, bull among men. He says that I will not be defeated in dice. I'm going to fight, challenge the Cortenia. Cortenia means Yudhishthir. This is another name. And he says that I will challenge him, and I will take away everything from him. Okay. So what is happening here? Interestingly, what cannot be done on the field will be achieved on the table, meaning that अगर आप वॉर से नहीं जीत सकते तो आप टेबल पे लड़के जीत रहे हो. Okay, that meaning, and this is something which is far from being a warrior. In the game of minds, then bravery and courage and all of that does not play any role. So Kauravas, so the Pandavas are definitely very brave, very courageous. But when you're playing a game, when it's a game of mind, those things not come in handy, right? The Pandavas sure are not known for wit or cunning. Like they're not really, well, they're not stupid, but at the same time they're not sly. They're not cunning like Shakuni. Okay, so they cannot really deceive. They cannot really trick anybody, and they cannot really play with strategy. And this is actually Shakuni's skill, right? Now, uh, continuing to explore Duryodhana's character, Duryodhana is also very harsh and restless, and is not really pragmatic. He's not diplomatic, and he's also very brave. Like, you cannot say Duryodhana he's evil, but he's not a coward. He's also very brave, and is also very ruthless. But he also cannot strategize. It is only Shakuni who can strategize, who can think very cleverly. Okay, so when Shakuni urges Duryodhana to speak to the king about permitting a challenge of the dice, Duryodhana goes on back foot and is hesitant to speak to his father. So Shakuni tells that, okay, we cannot have a game of dice with the Pandavas because we need your father's permission, because the father is the king, right? Dhritarashtra is the king. He says that we need their permission and you must ask your father. And but Duryodhana says that no, I don't want to ask because I don't know how to ask him, and you know how to ask him the right way, meaning that Shakuni is very clever and Shakuni can probably convince his father to allow this, so therefore he wants Shakuni to ask. Okay, now why does Duryodhana feel incapacitated, means unable to speak to his father about permitting a game of dice? Why is Duryodhana hesitant? Does he suspect that it would betray his ill intent? Does he not want to talk to the Dhritarashtra because he thinks that he would accidentally say that why he's doing it because he wants to rob everything from Pandavas? Contrarily, does Duryodhana's conscience not allow him to justify his vicious plans? Maybe subconsciously he knows that what he's doing is bad, and therefore he doesn't really want to act on it, doesn't really want his father's permission. That's another interpretation. Now, and all these, variations, all these variations and doubts in Duryodhana's character make him a more human and plausible character, meaning that, he is not just a completely evil, out and out evil person. There are some contradictions, there are some parts of him that make him more human, because, every human being, not everybody is perfect, right? Not everybody is, not everybody is like, evil. So there are goods and bad. So that's how really the real world is. Like, there are very, very few people who are completely evil, and you can say yes, Duryodhana is completely evil, but there are also instances like these where it looks like, where it seems like that he is conscious about the evil or the bad steps that he's planning to take in the future. All right, now I am going to check again if any of you have, there are no comments in the live Q&A. So I will keep continuing. What I'm going to do is I'm going to check very quickly if you have, if any of you have, like, I'm assuming that this is a 2-hour class, even though it has been listed to be a 1-hour class. It is actually a 2-hour class, and or, well, 1 hour 50 minutes class. So because I don't know if how many of you can hear me, and it is just such a a difficult format to interact with. So just tell me if you guys want to break. I will just just check in the live Q&A to see if you have any doubts or anything like that before I proceed further, because I still have another 16 or something slides left, and like, not 16, even less than that. Yeah, about 15 more slides left, and I don't really need so much time. So I just want to hear from you. Please type in the live Q&A if you have any doubts, if you have understood anything so far. Okay, so I'm just going to make an announcement here. Ask your doubts and questions here. Okay, so I've sent you something, and please let me know if you can hear it, and I'm going to wait for a couple of minutes, and in the meantime I'm just going to check if any of you have I'm just checking all your messages, and I see that a lot of you have not been able to join the class, which I don't know why is that happening, but please understand that I am not the person to be calling in the middle of the class. Okay, please do not call me in the class. Like, I cannot take your calls. All right. I am just checking any more if I'm getting any comments. Please get back to me. Okay, so because I don't see any comments, and I'm not sure if you can actually hear me or even see it, but I would really recommend that you understand how to operate this, because I've taken classes before, and usually the live event Q&A, it's fairly active. So I don't know why I cannot really see anything from you guys, but I understand this is your first years and this is your first time. So please help out for those who are able to hear this and see this, please understand. Please try to help your other batchmates, and so that they can attend the classes. Okay, now moving on. Exploring Duryodhana's character. We already did this, and now we are moving on to the emotional manipulation of Dhritarashtra, right? So up until this point, what we have seen is that Duryodhana goes and sees the Maya palace. He's extremely jealous, and he wants to defeat the Pandavas. He wants to take away all their wealth. And at this point, and then he talks to Shakuni, and then they make a plan of having a game of dice, and in which Shakuni would beat them and take everything away from them. We have reached up until this point. Then now the decision is about getting the permission from Dhritarashtra, who is the king, to have this game of dice, because without the permission of Dhritarashtra, they cannot do this game. Okay, so now Shakuni goes to Dhritarashtra and he makes a case for the game ceremony before Dhritarashtra dramatically. So Shakuni, he's very clever with words, he's very smart, and he exploits the king's emotions by cashing in on the pain and suffering of Duryodhana. So he says that, please, Dhritarashtra, please look how much your son is suffering. Uska kitna bura ho raha hai. Please, aap allow kar dijiye ye game of dice. And he says, how Dhritarashtra looked pale and yellow and wan and brooding. Okay, and Dhritarashtra is completely confused. He says, I don't understand the cause. He asks Duryodhana, I do not see a cause for your grief. You wear fine clothes, you eat hash of meat, purebred horses carry you. Why are you yellow and worn? Costly beds and charming women, all the recreation you want. All this waits on your word without a doubt, as though on the words of gods. So he's saying that, you have everything. You have good horses, you have beautiful houses. And he also says that, you are, whatever you want, you get it. It's like as if, you're a god. So what is the problem? Now, before moving on, note that how wealth of the court is described as also the privileges the king enjoy. So of course, what the wealth that the king has is also the privileges that the king enjoys. And that costly Eva, you see that line, right? That costly beds and charming women are spoken in one breath. So he says how Dhritarashtra says, costly beds and charming women, all the recreation in one. So the fact that you saying costly beds and charming women are said in the same breath tells us a lot about the type of about the place of women in society, where they are just seen as objects and possessions and recreations. Okay, and basically what it reflects, he's talking about horses, he's talking about meat, he's talking about nice clothes, and then he talks about women. And the fact that women are sort of included in the same category just reflects that women are basically seen as objects to men, and objects who bring pleasure to men, who serve men, who comfort men, who are for men's enjoyment, and so on and so forth. Okay, and this idea that women are objects, and you can treat them as ever you like, as if the men sort of own them. This idea, we also come back to it. We come back to it again later on in the plot, in the story about what later on happens in the court, when with Draupadi's Chirharan craze. Okay, now the power of Maya. Now we are going back again to the topic of Maya. Remember when when Duryodhana goes to the Palace of Illusions, the Maya Palace of Yudhishthir, of the Pandavas, he is completely enamored. He is shocked, and he's struck by just how incredibly beautiful and how and just how nice the whole palace is, right? And this is of course Maya. It's like, he's getting the whole idea of, you're attracted to Moh and Maya, and he's affected by it. And now this idea, this power of Maya also keeps continuing. It continues even in this scene, and I'll tell you how this really happens. So the Pandava's aura continues to haunt Duryodhana as he tells Dhritarashtra, "I eat and dress like any miserable man, and that my pleasure no longer satisfies me, now that I have seen the radiant fortunes of Yudhishthir." He says that he was so affected, like he is so attracted to Yudhishthir's palace, because it's a palace of illusions. It is supposed to have that effect. He feels that there's nothing that makes me happy. I don't feel satisfied or anything like that. And then almost in a trance basically means that he, as if like, he is controlled, like, he's hypnotized by this Maya palace. Duryodhan seems to live the memory of his visit at Indraprastha. So he sort of starts retelling, aisa hua, vaisa hua, maine ye dekha, maine wo dekha. And he savors the experience and describes what he saw to Dhritarashtra, who must imagine all that is being told to him. Okay, so because Dhritarashtra cannot see, and Duryodhana relives imaginatively the experiences he narrates. Both go over in their minds the splendids of Indraprastha. So the way the descriptions of the Maya palace are given, even Duryodhana, even in his imaginations, he can understand how grand and just how beautiful the place is. And Duryodhana's description may be exaggerated and understandable, as he has been influenced by the scene in Indraprastha. So, ho sakta hai ki what he is saying to his father is exaggerated, okay? Like, wo zyada karke bol raha hai, because of course he's very infatuated by that place. But this exaggerated speech, मतलब उसको बड़ा चढ़ा के बोलने का एक और reason है that he's trying to persuade his father. He's trying to persuade Dhritarashtra to make his judgment on the basis of what he hears. Because Dhritarashtra cannot really see, right? He's blind, so he doesn't know exactly how nice the Maya palace is. So वो जानबूझकर उसको exaggerate करके अपने father को बोलता है, जिससे कि the father realizes कि पांडवास के पास कितना कुछ है, and it must be taken away from them. Okay. Now, Duryodhana, through his description, has justified his wish. Okay, in fact, he like the way he describes how beautiful Yudhishthir's palace is. He justifies his wish that because it is so beautiful, because it is so amazing, therefore I must take it away from them. And this is how he justifies it by explaining how nice the place is. He says that it's so nice, therefore I must have it. I must take control of it. Okay, and therefore he says, and this justifies the necessity to take prompt action and gain supremacy over the Pandavas. Okay, he says, this man knows the dice, king, and he will be able to take the fortune of the Pandavas in a game. Pray allow it. So he's very direct. He says that, they have this nice palace. I want it. They cannot have this kind of power. Shakuni Mama can beat them in the game of dice. Just allow it, because they should not have, like, I want this. They cannot have this power. And Duryodhana, who had earlier felt, very incapable of reaching out to to say the truth, he flat out says this कि मैं ये चाहता हूँ, इसलिए मैं ये करना चाहता हूँ. Okay, so continuing on the topic of convincing Dhritarashtra is visibly moved. Like, he understands that why his son wants it, but he is not yet very vulnerable. Like, he's not so stupid that whatever his son's, not yet, keep this in mind, that he will not just do whatever his son wants him to do. Okay, and so he decides to seek advice. Okay, so he decides to seek advice from my wise counselor, the steward. Okay. And the steward is actually Vidur. Okay, Vidur is the third brother. The wise counselor, the steward, who is far-sighted and will put first the law and our ultimate benefit. Okay. Now, note the difference between Duryodhana's wish for instant gratification and Dhritarashtra's emphasis on ultimate benefit. So, what is happening here until this point in the scene is that Dhritarashtra, okay, he hears his son, he understands that why his son is behaving this way, but at the same time, and up until this point, he being a king, he wants to take counsel from the steward, take counsel from his, minister, and who he thinks is far-sighted and will put first the law and our ultimate benefit. So what he's saying is that, yes, okay, he understands his son wants this, but the main idea as a king, what he must focus on as a king would be the overall benefit of the people, would be the overall benefit of the kingdom, and doing what is actually right. Okay. Now, what effectively is happening here is that Dhritarashtra is appearing to the idea of broader humanism, while the former speaks of individual upliftment. So Dhritarashtra is focused on when he says our ultimate benefit, it means that he's focusing on the betterment of all people. He does not want to do something which can affect other people. Okay, so he doesn't want to do something bad which can basically affect the kingdom. While Duryodhana is basically concerned about his what we would call individual upliftment. He's basically concerned about making himself more powerful and gaining the palace. Okay. Now, here it is the judgment of the steward who is seen as the pronouncer of truth. Okay, and in those judgments, the king places his faith. However, the idea is nipped in the bud, and that's why the king says that, I will consult my minister, I will consult my steward, and I will see what he thinks, because he is the one who knows the right from wrong, and I want to see what he has to say. But the idea is not allowed. So why? Because Duryodhana already knows that, if Dhritarashtra asks his counsel, then they will say no, do not do this. Okay, so Duryodhana is aware that what he's doing is wrong, and if the council member is asked, then he's going to say no, that they're not allowed this game of time. Therefore, Duryodhana does not let his father ask the question. Okay, so Duryodhana is aware from that point of view of justice and the state's welfare, which the steward represents. So, and the act of challenging the Pandavas to a game of dice could cost them dear. Duryodhana is aware that, doing something like this can lead to something really bad. It will not be in the interest of the kingdom, and therefore he does not let his father ask the question. Okay, he gives the king no time to think about it, so he doesn't let his father think about it, and in fact plays the part of a victim, manipulating his father's emotions. So Duryodhana's motive is that he is trying to stop Dhritarashtra from asking Vidur that shall we allow the game of dice or not, and because he knows that Vidur is going to say no, he does not want his father to ask, and therefore he quickly tries to manipulate his father, and he does so by playing a victim. He says, when you are turned down, lordly king, I shall kill myself. Okay, this reproach by Duryodhana moves the king whose affection gets the better of him as he acts contrary to his wisdom. Okay, now because Duryodhana is acting in a way that, please excuse me for a minute. Yeah. Now, because Duryodhana is being manipulative, he's saying that, I am your son and I will kill myself, and he basically emotionally blackmails his father. So ultimately what happens is that Duryodhana's concern for his Dhritarashtra's concern for his son, as a good father, takes this precedence over him being a good king. Okay, and he therefore allows it contrary to his own wisdom. Okay, now summing up what happens with the Dhritarashtra decision. Once the orders are given, Dhritarashtra turns into a person of steely resolve. So once he said that, okay, fine, you can do the game of the dice, he does not change his mind. Okay, even though Vidura says that, nay, please, don't allow this game of dice, it will only lead to calamity. He says that, no, I will not change my mind, I have already decided it. Now, it is something interesting. The king was initially keen to take advice from Vidura, okay, now turns it down. So once he's already passed his judgment that, okay, fine, you can have the game of dice, he's no longer interested in the judgment of the steward. And this is because here Dhritarashtra is ultimately the king. Okay, and his language carries the mark of authority, meaning that a king can consult his ministers for saying, okay, should we do this, should we not do this, okay, but At the same time, the king also has the authority to pass judgment. Like, he does not really need to listen to his ministers. Okay, so here he is really just acting on his authority. उसने pass कर दिया judgment कि हाँ ठीक है तुम game of dice कर लो, and when Vidura says कि no you should cancel it, he refuses to listen because it is ultimately in his authority कि whether he will permit this game or not. Okay, now secondly, Dhritarashtra seems to shift the onus of his decision on destiny entirely by suggesting that it is the supreme destiny that makes this befall. So basically, what Dhritarashtra is saying is that he says that जो होगा, जो destiny में है, वो तो होगा. Okay, so I am not the one who is really responsible. I am not the अगर पांडवास अगर हार जाते हैं गेम ऑफ डाइस में, सब कुछ लूज कर जाते हैं, तो इसमें मेरी तो कोई गलती नहीं है because जो डेस्टिनी में है वो तो होगा. So he's basically saying कि even though मैंने allow किया वो गेम होने के लिए, that does not make me responsible. It was in their destiny to lose, and so they are losing. It is not my problem. So he says that he as an individual is only a carrier of command and not an active agent. The emphasis on destiny in the book is a significant motive that reoccurs all the time. So you can say that when Dhritarashtra says that मेरी इसमें कोई even though मैंने allow कर दिया गेम ऑफ डाइस, इसमें मेरी फिर भी कोई गलती नहीं है because उनकी destiny में लिखा था कि ऐसे होगा. Basically here he is trying to get rid of any responsibility. He's not trying to take the responsibility that he agreed to the game of dice. And another point is that the game, the story keeps going back and back on the idea of destiny, that the idea of fate, that जो decided hai, that is going to happen. Okay, now sorry, now reversal of fortune, this number is not necessary. I'm going to take that off. Reversal of fortune. We find that in the first half of the chapter of the dicing, Duryodhana goes on narrating accounts of the vast influence of wealth of King Kautanya, Yudhisthira. Okay, so right in the beginning, I talked about how Duryodhana is, how they're extremely wealthy, and how the Pandavas are doing very well, and they are living and they're thriving, and they have fortune and they have friends and everything, and they have power. Now, such descriptions cover the first part of the book and paint for us a picture of exuberance, plenitude, and luxury that belong to the Pandava. So, in the first part of the book, we see the peak of power for the Pandavas. The Pandavas are at their best. Okay? The later half of the chapter, on the other hand, reveals to us a complete reversal of fortune. The riches of the Pandavas are reduced to slaves. So at one point, the Pandavas are extremely well. They are wealthy, they are powerful, they are strong in the very beginning of the chapter, and by the end of the chapter, they are turned into slaves because they lose everything. They even lose themselves, so they become slaves, right? The detailed descriptions. Now, why is this important? So the detailed descriptions which Duryodhana gives in the beginning of the chapter, talking about just how powerful and just how wealthy the Pandavas are, that has a dramatic effect. It is because that that just how wealthy and strong and powerful the Pandavas were, and when they become slaves, the effect is even more shocking. Because for example, if somebody steals 100 rupees, that is still a crime. But if somebody steals 1 billion rupees, that's a bigger crime. Okay, so so the idea is a lot of people go bankrupt, like regular middle class people go bankrupt. I'm just giving you an example. But when what's that Kingfisher person's name, that Malia when that Malia person, Vijay Malia, when he went bankrupt, that made the news because it's a big person falling from grace. It's a big person whose fortunes have been reversed. Okay, so the reason why all that description about Pandava's fortune is given is precisely because when they fall from that fortune, it makes the whole thing look even more shocking. Okay, now the sequence around dicing event was the sequence around the dicing event was the root of destruction of the world. Okay, so what happens in the dicing is what is seen as the root of destruction of the world. Of course, it's an exaggeration, not of the world, but of the world that we see in Mahabharata, because what happens in the dicing, which later becomes the reason why you have the Kurukshetra war. Okay, The reversal in the case of the Pandavas is complete. The reversal of fortunes, I mean, is complete when he not only loses his riches, his brothers, but also his wife. Okay. Now, the game of dice. What happens in the game of dice? And I'm sure that everybody, or at least most of you already know this. Yudhishthira is invited by Vidura to Dhritarashtra's palace to play and enjoy a family game. Okay, Yudhishthira's first reaction is, at a dicing, we surely shall quarrel. Vidura is quick to agree and proclaim, I know that the game will bring disaster. Interestingly, both Vidura and Yudhishthira, considered wise men in the book, hold similar opinions of the consequences of the dice game. Yet, both agree to become part of it and not stall it. They're both bound by the sense of duty of dharma towards King Dhritarashtra. Now, here is the thing, right? And this is very important. And again, we are going back to the topic of dharma. Yudhishthira and Vidura, who are both very smart, they're shown to be clever, smart, wise men in the book. They both know that this game of dice will lead to something very bad. Okay, this is not going to end well. Okay, and at the same time, even though they both know it, they both do not refuse. They do not, at least Yudhishthira does not refuse to play the game, and this is because he is bound by a sense of duty towards King Dhritarashtra. अगर King Dhritarashtra ने उनको बुलाया है कि आप आइए और एक game of dice के लिए, it is Yudhishthira cannot refuse it, because it is a king who has invited him, right? So he's bound by the sense of dharma. Even though he knows that this is going to be something bad, he still does it because he's bound by the sense of dharma. All right. Now, at the game, Yudhishthira loses everything. This is something which I'm sure you all know. Yudhishthira loses everything bit by bit. He goes on to lose so he loses his wealth, he loses his chariots, horse, and cars. Then he loses, as he says, my city, my country, the wealth of all my people, till he is left with nothing but his brothers and wife. Them too he stakes and loses all, including himself, in the game. Okay. So he stakes his kingdom, his wealth, his people, then he also stakes his brothers, he stakes his wife, and he also stakes himself. And at each turn, we are told, and this is a line from the text, Shakuni decided, tricked, and cried, won. Okay? At Shakuni's insinuation, yet there is, and this is a line from the text where Shakuni says, yet there is your precious queen. One throw is yet unwon. So first, he loses everything, and he loses himself and his brothers. But there is still one thing which he hasn't lost, which is his wife. Okay, and Shakuni, convinces him that just take your wife, just take your wife, and you can win everything back. And what happens, as we all know, Yudhishthira takes her and loses the game. Okay, now. Losing Draupadi. How many slides we have? Another 9 slides to go. We will finish it, no problem. Losing Draupadi. The king is thrilled. The king is thrilled by the Kauravas winning spree. You remember how in the beginning, by king I mean Dhritarashtra, he was very unsure कि ऐसा allow करेंगे या नहीं, but now he's extremely happy that the Kaurava is winning, and he also is completely blinded by power, like his son Duryodhana, who with deep satisfaction. And now that he has won Draupadi, he tells his steward to go bring Draupadi, and he says, the beloved wife whom the Pandavas honor, let her sweep the house and run all our errands. What a joy to watch. So he's saying that, now Draupadi is our slave, and she is this beloved wife of Pandavas. We are going to make her do everything. We're going to make her clean the house. We're going to make her sweep. We're going to treat her like a servant. This is going to be so much fun. Okay. Now, constantly, Vidura underpins the fact that the clash between the two groups, the Kauravas and the Pandavas, the later are more powerful, and that Duryodhana is a dumb deer before the Pandavas, who are angry tigers. Okay. Now, what is like Vidura keeps telling him, even after when he's trying to humiliate Draupadi, he says that don't do this Duryodhana, because you are not as strong as the Pandavas. The Pandavas are way too strong than him. The Vidura, we are told, as we know, is a wise sage and who can see the future. Okay, and his words carry an air of ominous finality. Foretelling is what we say. So when Vidura is somebody who's wise. We already talked about. I already mentioned this, and he can also see the future. He's one of the people in the story who can see the future. And when he says that, do not do this to them, do not Duryodhana, do not do this to the Kauravas, do not do this to the Pandavas, he is basically foretelling that something bad is going to happen. There's an ominous finality. Okay. He further asserts, for this to be sure, spells the end of the Kurus, a grisly end, the perdition of all. So he says that this is going to be the end of the Kuru clan, and this is going to destroy everybody. And so don't do this. But of course, Duryodhana does not listen to him. He's completely maddened by rage and revenge, and so he makes his servant bring Draupadi to the court. Now we are coming on to Draupadi, probably the part which all of you are waiting for. The case of Draupadi. Okay. It is worth noting that the assembly to which Draupadi is dragged is meant for men to exchange political activities as also entertainment, and both these spheres are exclusive to men. Okay, so the idea here is that first you have to keep in mind that in a palace certain places are segregated. Okay, so some places are for women, some places are for men, and especially very public places like political, like assembly halls and so on and so forth. Those places were exclusively meant for men, where they would have entertainment activities, or where they would be discussing about politics and so on and so forth. So Draupadi is dragged into the sphere of men, where usually women do not go. And while the idea of women entering a sphere of men can be seen and in a sense that it is empowering, but of course this is really not the case. Here she is dragged into the realm of men to humiliate her. Okay, she questions the judgment of Yudhisthira. Okay, she questions the judgment of Yudhisthira. She says, what son of a king would hazard his wife? She says, what kind of a king are you that you are putting me at risk? Like that is not a good king. And here Draupadi raises a significant question regarding Yudhishthira's right on her when he had lost himself. He says, Bharata, whom did you lose first, yourself or me? So she is basically questioning how did you lose me? Tumne mujhe kaise daav pe laga diya? Because remember that Yudhishthira had already lost himself. Like he has already staked himself and he had already lost himself. So if you have already lost yourself, if you are already lost, then how exactly are you putting me on daav? Like how exactly are you putting me as a bet when you have already lost yourself? Like how can you do this? So what is your right? How can you do this? Okay. The scene where, and then moving on, the scene where Draupadi is dragged into the court by the Sashan, and she asks this question that Bharata, whom did you? So usko bulane ke liye leke jata. The servant goes and tries to bring Draupadi, and Draupadi says ki I will not come because how does Yudhishthira has the right to lose me when he has already lost himself? So up until this point, she hasn't come. Okay, but so she says that many only. So the servant goes back, and then the Shashan goes and he drags Draupadi out. So he says, the scene where the Draupadi is dragged into the court by the Shashan is appalling. Okay, and of course it's very extremely insulting. It is very humiliating. The Shashana speaks to her in a very brazen and a very disrespectful manner, and he says, "All right, now come, Panchali, you are one. Look upon Duryodhana without shame. You shall now love the Kurus." So basically what he's saying is that, you are now one, you are a slave. And basically what usually happens with women slave years is that women slaves are usually sex slaves. So he's saying that when he's saying that you shall now love the Kurus, he's basically saying that you will now be a sex slave to all the Kauravas. Okay. Now moving on. Humiliation of Draupadi. When Draupadi tells the Sashana, this is now my month. This is my sole garment, man of slow wit. The Sashana, what she is basically saying, this is now my month, is that she is on her, it basically means that she is on her periods. Okay. And this is my sole garment, meaning that this is so you usually at this time pe Mahabharata likha gaya tha, or supposedly this time pe, Mahabharata is being played out. It is being done at that time. Women, when they got their periods, they would be isolated. They would be put away. They would be living in a different room. They would not be sleeping with their husbands. They would not be in the same room as men. And they usually wear one dirty cloth, and they're sort of treated as an outcast. Okay, because the idea of periods are considered, or at that even now, it's considered to be something which is very polluting, which is something which is very dirty. And so when women bought their periods, they were sort of like, made into an outcast and sort of pushed away somewhere else. Okay, so that's why she only has this one cloth, because she's only wearing this one dirty blood stained sari because she's on her periods. Okay, and she said that no, let me go, you can't drag me in my cloth, I'm on my periods. Okay, and Sashana, of course, he has no compassion, and so he says that sure, you be in your month, Yajnasena's daughter, or wear a lone cloth, or go without one. You have been won at the game, and been made a slave, and one lectures with slave as the fancy befalls. He says that I don't care, you have periods or not. You are now a slave, and I will do whatever I want with you. And lectures basically means that I can molest you, I can rape you, I can do whatever the hell I want with you, because I am your master, and slaves have no right. Okay, so what is the significance of referring to Draupadi's menstruating time and again in the 8th? So why is it important? Why is it this important part that Draupadi is menstruating? Why is this crucial? So the idea here is that at one level, it could have been used by the writer to evoke deeper sympathy for the woman and her plight. Okay, so one is that it becomes even more sad and depressing that ek to usko खींच खींच के लेके जा रहे हैं. At the same time, she's also menstruating, so it evokes a deeper sense of sympathy. Okay, however, there's another significant another significant fact, which is that a menstruating woman signifies her reproductive worth as a woman, meaning that only women who menstruate are women who can be mothers. Like, understand this is basically biology, and I will not go into this. So a menstruating woman are women who are able to be mothers. Okay, and this sort of underlines the reproductive worth of a woman. So the entire discourse of woman as the Jug Janini, the giver of birth to the world, gets established here. So the main fundamental role of women as mothers, as reproducers of the world, of giving birth to the world, is sort of underlined and is basically highlighted here. Okay, the scene becomes more dramatic for this reason, as the two attributes of woman as mother and slave get starkly presented here. So the idea here is basically that we've already seen that so that there are two things. She's already a slave, meaning that she's a sex slave, and at the same time, she's also, the fact that she's menstruating also reminds us that she's a mother. So these two very contrasting things, that one woman as a sex slave and the other thing, woman as a mother, as a giver of birth, are brought together in the same scene. Okay, now Draupadi in this scene already asks two questions, and now we're going to turn to the legality of the questions. And when I say legality, it doesn't mean how we understand legality in today's world. We are going to look at it in the sense of what it really means at that time, like what it meant during the time of Mahabharata, or the time this episode is taking place. Now, Mahabharata, Draupadi basically poses two questions before the audience, and one question we've already touched upon, and I'm going to repeat it here again. One, whether Yudhisthira, who has lost his freedom by losing the game of dice, has any moral or legal right to take Draupadi. So when Yudhisthira has already lost himself, when he has himself become a slave to Kauravas, how does he, as a slave, because slaves don't have rights. So if he has already lost his freedom and he has no rights, then how does he have the right to stake his wife? Okay, so how does he do that? That's the first question she asks. Okay, and Bhishma replies, a man without property cannot stake another's, right? Because Draupadi has Yudhishthira has lost everything, so a man without property cannot stake another's. But given that wives are the husband's chattels, the Pandava said, I have been won, and therefore I cannot resolve this issue. So Bhishma is unable to respond. He says that I don't know what is the answer to this. I don't know if there's what is right here, because he says that yes, on one hand he has lost everything. He has himself become a slave, so he has no freedom. He has no right. So how can he bet something else? But Bhishma also says that ultimately, as he says, wives are husbands' chattels, meaning that wives are property of their husband. So he still has the right to do it, but we don't know. So there's this contradiction between so there's a confusion between the fact that Yudhishthira is now a slave. Does he still have the right over his wife? Okay, he as a husband has a right over his wife to stake his wife, but when he is himself a slave, does he still have a right over his wife? That is the question which we don't get an answer to. Okay, the riddle remains unsolved, as none can say with certainty, what the law says in this case. Okay, we do not know with certainty what the law says in this case. Okay, however, Bhishma's statement, given that wives are the husband's chattel, speaks volumes. So when he says that wives are the husband's chattels, it speaks volumes about the status of women in that age and the common views held. So this again goes back to the idea how women are basically seen as property that men own. Like, women are not seen as people in their own rights. They're just seen as properties that men have control over, men have power over, that men own. Okay, Hanji. Okay. Right. So he loses his freedom. He loses his legal point. So we don't know what the answer is. Okay. And finally, Karna in the scene 2 argues that now Karna also, Karna also weighs in. And I hope you know who Karna is. We will also talk about him in the next class. In the scene, who argues that Draupadi is part of Yudhishthir owns, and thus she has been won. So he's saying that, because Draupadi is a property of Yudhishthir, therefore automatically when Yudhishthir lost everything, she's also been won. Okay, so basically again this retaliates the fact that Draupadi is seen as an object here owned by the man, or in her own case, in this case, men. Okay, now attacking Draupadi's character in response. So this is a huge bit, and here something is like Draupadi at this point, she screams and he's shouting, she's saying, well, how can you let this happen? This is humiliating and this is insulting and so on and so forth. But here Karna sort of retrots, or responds to her. Karna is basically questioning her character, saying that, and this is what he says. Okay, and I'm going to read out this big paragraph that he says. He says that, or if you think that it was against the law to bring her into the hall clad in one piece of clothing, listen to what I have to say in reply to that. The gods have laid down that a woman shall have one husband, Sion of Kuru. She submits to many men and assuredly is a whore. Thus, there is, I think, nothing strange about taking her into the hall, or to have her in one piece of clothing, or for that matter, naked. She, the Pandavas, wealth, and the Pandavas themselves have all been made by Sabhuvala here according to the law. Several points require notice here. One, that Draupadi has no right over herself, and that she is the Pandavas' possession. Okay, that he says that she has been lost, and the Pandavas themselves have all been won by Sabhuvala here according to the law, meaning that she has been lost and she has no right over herself, and she's ultimately Pandavas' possession. Two, aspersion is cast against Draupadi's character, as Karna views her as a whore. Karna calls her a whore because she submits to many men who may be her husbands by law. Okay, it is the female sexuality that is our target here. It is that female sexuality which is target. If Draupadi can be made available to 5 men, why can't others in the gathering likewise enjoy her? Basically, he calls her a whore because she has 5 husbands, and here basically the idea of female sexuality is getting targeted, and he's saying that if she can have 5 husbands, then why can't she enjoy other men? Why can't she have more men? Okay, so what Karna is basically saying is that she cannot be considered a respectful, virtuous woman because she exercises the right to be with several men. This makes her a whore in Karna's views, and therefore the men have all the right to bring her, for that matter, naked into the assembly hall. Okay, she says that as a virtuous woman, she would not have 5 husbands, she would have 1 husband, and because she has 5 husbands, this automatically makes her a whore, and therefore it doesn't matter if you bring her in one cloth or completely naked. But Here, what is Karna is missing is that she did not choose to have 5 husbands. Draupadi did not say that I will marry all the 5 Pandavas. It is she actually married Arjun, and then Kunti accidentally. So when Arjun marries Draupadi, he brings her home and he says to his mother, "Mother, look what I bought." And the mother says, and Kunti says that, "Oh, whatever you got, share it with all your brothers." And again, coming back to Dharma, because they must obey their mother, what happens is ultimately Arjun ends up sharing his wife with all of his brothers. He ends up, so all the brothers end up marrying Draupadi. So the fact that she has 5 husbands is not because she chose it, it because it was imposed on her. Okay. So the whole logic of, and so the whole logic that she has 5 husbands, therefore she's a whore, is problematic. Because firstly, just because a woman has multiple partners does not make her a whore. But and even if that logic was correct, even that is something which Draupadi did not choose. It was forced on her. Okay. Now, disrobing. Now, disrobing is basically the Chirharan scene. Okay. Now, here is what it is narrated. Forcibly laid hold of Draupadi. Dursashana forcibly laid hold of Draupadi's robe, and in the midst of the assembly began to undress her. Okay. Draupadi is molested and disrobed before the assembly of men, all her gurus and sages and relatives in law, and yet nobody stops it. There are a lot of people in the assembly hall. It is not just the Kauravas and the Pandavas and Dhritarashtra. There are a lot of people who are watching the game of dice, and nobody stop her. Okay, and what does it depict? Why does nobody stop her? Does it depict their helplessness, where they're born to the law too, at or what were they too appalled to react? Like, what are they too shocked that they can't do any? That they're so shocked that they can't do anything, or is it because they're bound by law, mean that they're bound by dharma, meaning that she is technically a slave now, so the Shashana can do whatever he wants, and therefore they're bound by law that they cannot interfere. In any case, the story reaches a point when human agency, when people fail to respond to a quandary, stands incapacitated before the law. It is because of the law of dharma that you cannot interfere between what a man does to his property, that all the other men, all the other people in the assembly hall are not able to save the property. So again, the question arises: how good is dharma? How good is blindly following dharma? Okay. Now, what happens finally in this scene is that the epic turns into this trope called Duke's ex machina. Okay, Deus ex machina. What this basically means is divine intervention. What saves Draupadi from the trauma of being stripped naked, her humiliation and suffering, finds release in the glory, in the godly act. So when her skirt was being ripped off, and these are again the italics are quotes, when her skirt was being ripped off, Lord of the people, another skirt appeared every time. A terrible roar went up from all the kings, a shout of approval as they watched the greatest wonder on earth. So because no other man is able to protect her, so what happens is we have a divine intervention. Lord Krishna appears and he makes the length of her sari unending, so that you cannot take it off. Okay, and this is, and when there's divine intervention in the story, just the term is Deus ex machina. Okay, now Draupadi's second question. Now, we already talked about the first question, which was that given that Yudhishthira is already a slave, has already lost himself, does he still have the right to lose Draupadi? That was the first question. The second question is the wife of the king Dharma, whose birth matches his, a slave or free? Speak, Kauravas. I shall abide by our question. I shall abide by our answer. Draupadi's question is relevant in our times as well, even now. That is asked: if a woman equal to a man becomes his possession in marriage, that he can buy and sell or stake and lose. Okay, so so basically what is happening is here is she saying that Pele, before she asked that, a man who is himself a slave, can he sell his wife? Can he stake his wife? Here she's asking a even broader question. She's saying that, does a man have a right at all to treat his wife as a property? Okay, like how I am also a Kshatriya, he's also a Kshatriya, and just because I'm married to him, does that make me his property? How is that logic? How is that right? Okay, now again, Karna gives his view on this subject based on accepted knowledge system of the time. And here he says there are three who own no property. Okay, a student, a slave, and an independent woman. The point of significance here again shows us how women are treated. He says that you cannot, you are you are a dependent woman, so you have no right, so you depend on your husband, and he decides whatever it is, and yes, you are not, you cannot be seen as an equal. Okay. And so what finally happens is that she says that, she accuses all the kurus and all the sages and all the men who are present there who allowed her molestation. And so here again, I already posed this question before: what is really the bigger law, to follow the rules of the game or to accept dharma? Because according to the law, what the Shashana was doing, disrobing Draupadi, was fine, because Draupadi was seen as his property. Is that okay, or is respecting women, more important? Which is more important? If dharma means, uh, isn't dharma also a part, isn't respecting women also a part of dharma? So these are the questions that really comes up. Now, some of the reactions which Pandavas have, Bhim is very angry, and he says that, he's going to burn off the Shashana's arms and everything. And while Arjun is calmer, and he says that the king was challenged by his foes, and remembering the Baronial law, he played at the enemy's wish. That was a great. Arjuna is very pragmatic. He says that, no, Beam, don't get angry. In fact, it is our glory that we accepted the proposal of this game, even though we knew we were going to lose, because we followed the Baronial law, which is meaning that we followed the dharma. Clearly, Arjun is more poised and detached than Bhim. However, it appears that the law appears that the law in fact dehumanizes him, and he's unable to pledge support to so Arjun, and in fact almost all the other Pandavas, they are so strong, so strict in following the dharma and the law, that they do not protect their wife. Okay. Now again, the question of law takes center stage. The law of not refusing the enemy if challenged is being posed here as an explanation for Yudhishthira's actions. Okay. Now, final slide. Finally, what happens in the scene? We hear horrible sounds of jackals and birds and everything, and these are seen as, ill omens. These are seen as bad omens, and Dhritarashtra hears all these sounds, and he thinks that these are bad omens for Kauravas. So he tries to solve this problem amicably. So he gives Draupadi 3 boons, or 3 favors that she can ask. So first she asks for the freedom of Yudhishthira, and the second boon she asks for the freedom of her husbands. I don't know why she doesn't ask freedom of all her husbands at the same time, but she asks for one boon for specifically Yudhishthira, and then second boon for freedom for all her husbands. And the third request she refuses to take. She says that I don't need a third husband. My husbands will find the good things king with their good acts. Okay. Now, basically what ultimately happens is Draupadi is able to accomplish what nobody else could. It was she who saves the Pandavas. It was she who saves the kingdom. It is she who basically gets all their property, all their wealth back, and it is she who saves her brothers, her husbands, from slavery. Thus, it is Draupadi, ironically, saving the Pandavas, who were meant to save her and protect her, and failed miserably at that. So here we are basically subverting typical gender norms, where husbands are meant to protect their wives. Here, in fact, the wife is basically protecting the husband. Like, the husbands completely failed to protect their wife. But Draupadi, in fact, ends up freeing her husband. Okay. So, and here the scene ends with Dhritarashtra gives everything back to the Pandavas that they're lost in the game, and then they leave their house for Indraprastha. Okay, so here I am ending our presentation, and I'm going to stop sharing the screen, and I'm going to stop here. I hope this was good and helpful for all of you. All the best, and we will please come in the next class, and we will talk about we will finish the other 2 sections, which will be tomorrow. Okay, so good luck, and take care, and I will see you tomorrow. I hope it was clear. If you have any questions, please you can either send me a message directly, or you can type in the live Q&A, which is a better idea. I will address your queries tomorrow. So all the best, and I think you have another class today in the afternoon for Kalidasa. So good luck and take care. Bye bye.